Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So what I want to do in this video is I want to do the part 2 to my last video where I was talking about Zen. And I want to basically supplement that by giving more of a positive account of what Zen is. So Zen really originates from Mahayana Buddhism, which actually ended up, moving from India into China and becoming Chan Buddhism. And then that ultimately ended up becoming Zen when it moved into Japan. So, but what Mahayana Buddhism is, it's viewed as the great basket, right? So the whole point of the Buddha nature, in a way, is to become like a bodhisattva. Okay, so your job is to try to help carry the community through to enlightenment. Okay, and there's two traditions in Buddhism. There's the I'm only concerned with my own enlightenment, which is a form of Indian Buddhism. And then there's the Great Basket, which is the Mahayana tradition, which is that the whole point of the Buddha nature is to not worry about your own enlightenment necessarily, but it's to try to help other people become enlightened. Almost kind of like a priestly kind of mentality. So you're focused on the relation, not necessarily only on yourself. So that tradition of Buddhism is actually what went into China. Okay, so the Mahayana tradition of Indian Buddhism actually transferred into China and it became Chan Buddhism. But what the Chinese did, due to their own philosophical proclivities, is they ignored the metaphysical aspect of it and focused more on the social aspect of it and the practical aspect of it. So you can, again, going back to my last video, Chinese philosophy is focused more on ethics and on pragmatism than it is on metaphysics and even epistemology, right? Whereas Indian philosophy, Western philosophy, even Islamic philosophy is more focused on metaphysics and epistemology than Chinese philosophy is, although there are obviously aspects of those in Chinese philosophy as well. So it's Chinese philosophy that moves into Japanese philosophy. So the context of, there was a struggle, like, because, Indian Buddhism is very metaphysical, right? The idea of no self. I mean, even you look at Nagarjuna, right? Read some Nagarjuna and you'll see, even though he's very, he's trying to prove nothing by denying everything, he's still coming from a very metaphysical perspective. That's not, right, what how Chinese philosophy normally operates. So Chinese philosophy is more focused on ethics. It's more focused on pragmatism. All right. So when you realize that when Buddhism entered China, it became a way to untangle yourself from metaphysics. That's the key thing to realize. So Zen, which went from China to Japan, went from Chan to Zen, it inherited that same kind of mentality. Like, people are stunted by metaphysics. Like, if you don't understand this, you don't really understand Zen. People are stunted by their metaphysics. Their thoughts in their minds they're looping on the thoughts in their minds. And because of that, they're stunting themselves from the Buddha nature. And actually, if you guys study the Buddha, like going back, actually like the Buddha himself, okay, not all the philosophy that came after the Buddha in India. The Buddha was very practical. And he talked about the Eightfold Path. And it was very practical. And it was all about the middle way. And that resonates a lot with Chinese philosophy, the middle way. Right? There's no duality between man and the divine in Chinese philosophy. Not really. You don't really hear a lot of God talk in Chinese philosophy. There's a famous quote by Confucius, something along the lines like, you ask me about God, but you don't even understand man. So you have to realize that the starting point of Chinese philosophy is very different from the starting point of Western philosophy, Indian philosophy, and Islamic philosophy. These are the four main philosophical traditions. All right. Japanese philosophy was in a way, a further influence. Chinese philosophy became Japanese philosophy. Okay. So, but really, it's Western philosophy, Islamic philosophy, Indian philosophy, and Chinese philosophy. Those are the four main philosophical traditions in world philosophy. Now, obviously, there's African philosophy, South American philosophy, all these other things, but we're talking about like major written traditions of philosophy that spread all around the world 2,000 years ago, right? What Zen ultimately is laying down your thought. But not in a Zen devil way. I mean, you're still going to realize, I have all these thoughts buzzing around in my mind. Of course. Of course you do. All of us do. You may even have a spirituality that's based on a philosophy. Of course you do. But what Zen does is Zen asks you to lay that on the table and set it aside. So this concept of nothingness, laying it down, letting it go, that's what Zen is about. But not used performatively, not used as a way to make fun of somebody or to hurt somebody, but as a way for your own spirituality. Now, there's two sides to that. Laying it down and then picking it back up. Setting it down, picking it up. Right? This is why Zen really is about wisdom, right? It's deep. But you can't really, you can't force Zen. I mean, you have to go through all the hoops of spirituality really before you can get to Zen proper. But even Zen proper would say there ain't no Zen proper, right? Because it's not an ideology. So you're still going to keep everything you have. The difference between somebody who's integrated Zen and somebody who hasn't is the ability to operate with wisdom, which is to pick things up and put things down as needed. Chop wood and carry water. Or carry water and chop wood is actually the actual quote. I think chop wood and carry water sounds better, but that's just my proclivity. So Zen ultimately, it's mocking, right? It's very mocking with regard to thought, metaphysics, but not too. You have to realize that if you just take that mocking approach to metaphysics, you're being dishonest because you have a metaphysics. You have, obviously have a metaphysics that you live by. So what Zen is teaching you is not to destroy your metaphysics. It's not talking about like burning all the books. What Zen is trying to teach you is to how to use wisdom with regard to picking things up and putting things down, including your own spirituality. That's what Zen is about. But until you have a spirituality, you can't really pick it up and put it down. So this is the thing. And there's a lot of people who they haven't even gone through, spirituality very deeply. Because you got to remember, like, the reason why the Chinese were reacting to Buddhism in this way is because it was like Indian Buddhism entering China, and they were learning all the metaphysics of the Indian Buddhism, the Mahayana tradition, like Nagarjuna, all this stuff. And so Zen ultimately was kind of a backlash to that Indian metaphysical influence in East Asian philosophy, like a really extreme backlash to the point of mu. So it's like we're going to take the emptiness from Nagarjuna, but we're going to discard all of the thought, all of the philosophy that went along with that. You don't need that. All you need is meditation and mu. Meditation and mu and chop wood and carry water. But you have all that underneath you. You studied all of that. So you can pick it up and put it down. It's not that metaphysics is bad. This is the point that I want to make about Zen. Zen sits at a higher level. So after, for example, let's say that after you've studied Shankara, you've studied Jung, you've studied, I don't know, who knows, whatever guru that you have, and you've come to a realization of truth or of the divine, however you feel that works, for your spirituality. And you have all these thoughts, all this philosophy that you've crystallized. Right? It's your philosophy. It's how you like to create your philosophy. And it's what you like to teach, maybe. What Zen is about distancing yourself. Just taking my socks off here so I can get a little more comfortable. Zen is about distancing yourself from your teachings, but not entirely. So it's about integrating emptiness with fullness. So in other words, I don't lose my teachings when I stop teaching. You're still gonna create the way that your finite perspective has been creating thus far. This is why I like to think that Zen comes after you do shadow work, after you do kind of Jungian stuff, because you have to kind of reintegrate the human before you can move into Zen. Like if you haven't even if you haven't even reintegrated the human, you're still in abstract land, right? You're not. Zen is not going to be anywhere near you. But and then of course you can be like a Zen devil where you're parroting Zen, but you're not really at the level that Zen actually really fits. So where Zen would fit, ideally, I would think, would be that, you've had a kind of a unity awakening, you've had a I am awakening, and you've reintegrated the human back into things with a kind of shadow work, Jungian thing. And then after that, Zen can become useful when you start realizing that all this thought can be let go of. But it doesn't disappear. See, that's the thing. That's what chop wood and carry water means. It's about chop wood and carry water. So it's about you're going to have a spirituality. Everybody does. But don't let that hang you up. Especially you teachers out there, right? It's really common. When we get into teacher mode, we become exactly the person who is not Zen, right? Zen would be get out of the temple. Go live your life. Right? You've been in the temple too long. I don't care whether you're a teacher or whether you're a student. You've been in the temple so long that all you're doing is you're looping on your thoughts and your beliefs, even if they are Zen beliefs, ironically. So this is why I like to say Zen is not an ideology. It's the inverse of ideology. Zen is the final teaching really in East Asian philosophy. Well, I mean, it's not the final teaching, but it's a very high level. I mean, it's after you have maybe been exposed to a great deal of metaphysics. And you have that. You don't need it anymore. Like, why are you looping on this? Why are you teaching other people? Why are you talking about this to other people? Okay, if you're trying to make a living doing that, that's fine. But that's not the highest level. Because you see, in that case, you're still trapped in metaphysics. You're just profiting off of that, right? But what Zen would be, okay, I can do that. But you're going to come at it from like a much more humble perspective, though, I think, with Zen. You're going to learn. See, the thing with Zen is that you're going to have a humility because you're able to pick it up and put it down. Like, in other words, I'm not so invested in truth or God or love or beauty or wisdom or whatever it is, whatever metaphysical principle it is. I'm not so invested in that I can't put it down and just be in emptiness or nothingness. That's why Zen focuses on emptiness and meditation. And it focuses on pragmatism, how you live your life, what you do on a day-to-day basis, how you conduct yourself. Again, Chinese philosophy is focused on ethics more so than metaphysics. So Zen in a way is kind of a colon cleanse, for lack of a better metaphor, for, I would say, Western, Indian, and Islamic philosophy. But only after you have really gone down those roads really hard. Then it can be real. It's like a pipe cleaner, a psychedelic almost. You can think about, a good psychedelic trip is like a pipe cleaner. You ever think about that? Like if you do a psychedelic trip, whether it's mushrooms, LSD, 5-MeO, whatever it is, a good psychedelic trip, it's almost like a pipe cleaner where it just cleans your soul out, right? That's kind of what Zen does, but it does it without the need for psychedelics. How does it do it? Well, first of all, it makes you realize that you don't need the philosophy to be. Being precedes thought. And being is emptiness. The Buddha nature is emptiness. And it's about letting go and letting reality flow through you. It's about meditation, not getting caught up in reacting. Staying away from things that disturbing, that are attachments, because it's Buddhism, right? So, what is the one thing that is harmful to you? It's attachment to thought, right? See, dukkha, suffering. Dukkha is caused by craving. And there's a way out of the craving, which is the Eightfold Path. But it's not necessarily to think of no self in a metaphysical way like the Indian philosophers do. It's to think of self as metaphysics that you can pick up or put down. So all philosophy becomes like, this is what we live by. this is our spirituality, this is our mantra, to, no, this is just what I loop on from time to time. But I don't need to loop on that either. But I will, and I'll watch myself do that, and I'll watch other people do that too. So it's not like a Zen really properly understood. It's not an ideology. It's just a recognition of all of us are going to have an ideology, and not even two. We can get up underneath our own ideology and realize too that although we're looping on, whatever we preach, on a day-to-day basis for survival, the reality is that we don't have to. I mean, if you had no reason to make money anymore, right? And you were just, you had a little island in the Caribbean and you were a billionaire, you wouldn't be talking about any of this shit. And even if you were, ideally, you'd be at such a high level where you'd be like, I'm doing it as a hobby. I'm not doing it to make money. Like once you become a priest, that's an attachment, right? In Buddhism. See, in Zen, that's what you learn, right? It's like, don't, like if you're going to be a priest, you got to be a little bit more nuanced about being a priest. You have to admit that, you really don't need all that metaphysics to be. And this is a very powerful perspective to come to when you're honest with it, though. But you have to be humble, too, with this. Otherwise, you're going to be a Zen devil. You're going to be using this to shut somebody down. But if you're really at this perspective, you're looking at it like, hey, it's like, obviously, I've made over 100 videos. I've said a lot of things online, in my videos, in person. None of that goes against Zen. None of that goes against koans. But the recognition of Zen in me is that all of the, actually it's deeper than Zen. Zen isn't even the highest level, but let's just stick with Zen. The recognition with me is that I don't need any of that talk to be. I can be in total silence. Right? See, this idea that we need metaphysics to be, I think, is the fundamental challenge of Zen. We need this understanding, right? No, you don't. You really don't. You really don't. And I think people are kind of like misunderstood by people who are kind of inclined towards Zen. Like, and this is the caveat. The caveat is like, I get that, dude. I understand what Zen is, right? So it's like, don't try to school me with Zen. I already know. But the bottom line is that Zen doesn't say stop looping on your life. That's what chop wood and carry water means. Go do it, man. Zen isn't about like holding on to nothingness like Nagarjuna as some kind of metaphysical concept. See, that's where the Chinese and the Indians disagree. The Indians want to cling to metaphysics. The Chinese want to say yes and no. Pick it up when it's useful, put it down when it's not useful. See, it's that paradox, really, in Chinese philosophy that carries over into Chan and then to Zen. So when you exit the Zen monastery, you go live your life. Because now what Zen taught you is you don't have to live with your wagon hitched to metaphysics. Okay, it's like metaphysics is this star and you're hitching your wagon to metaphysics like hitching your wagon to a star. Well, that's what all teachers want you to do, right? Because they want you to buy their metaphysics. Whether it's universities, gurus, all kinds of people, even yourself. You want to sell yourself your own metaphysics. That's weird, right? But it's true. Think about that. If you're unconsciously looping on your own metaphysics without realizing that it's just a thought story that you're kind of like, your perspective tends to loop on, then, right? How wise is that? And you may know that, but you may try to conceal that too, right? Because there's no money to be made there. But again, it's like there are many ways to make a living other than selling metaphysics. And one thing I will tell you, just kind of a caveat here is resist the urge to think of Zen as metaphysics. Zen, in a way, is the pipe cleaner of metaphysics, but also saying you're going to do it anyway, but just be wiser about what you're doing. It's a higher level understanding, okay, than Advaita Vedanta or even Jungian philosophy. Like these people that are really just like trapped in narratives, man, when they have a Zen awakening, you're going to be at total peace and total silence. This is why, what's the big practice in Zen? It's meditation. You just sit like this, right? You sit. Whatever happens, happens. I can sit for hours and be in total silence and be perfectly fine, right? So being doesn't require a link to thought, but being will link to thought, and then it becomes kind of like a touch and go as to how being relates with thought. That's developed in Zen. So you're able to pick it up and put it down again, not to overstate that metaphor. So what I wanted to do in this video is I just wanted to give more of a positive account of what Zen is. In my last video, I gave more of like what Zen is not, right? But I also want to say too, the last couple of minutes here, I don't think Zen is the final stage. I think that, but Zen is a necessary stage. Like it's very obvious to me, like people who haven't had a real Zen awakening. And the way that you can tell is how beholden they are to thought. People that have had a Zen awakening, they talk like a regular person, right? They're not giving paragraphs and paragraphs of thought and theory, right? That's just not, you're not going to do that if you've had Zen awakening. If you're selling that, that makes sense, because you're selling basically thought to lower consciousness people. But if you've had a real Zen awakening, you're going to talk just like a normal person, right? Because you have such an understanding of the difference between emptiness and fullness, in a way, or being and thought. And you realize like, okay, like I'm going to create, but that creation is not going to be a necessary part of me unless I make it that way. And I'm still going to make it that way too, right? So you recognize too, like you're not going to be like this perfect empty thing, but it's just seeing that gap and appreciating that gives you a degree of, I would say, humility, and I would say integrity too. Because you ain't selling no snake oil to anybody, right? And you're very humble about it too. You're like, hey, look, man, this is what I tend to loop on. And you're not hiding a finite perspective and pretending like everything is infinite and you don't exist. You're not seen, right? Come on, like, so Zen is very practical too, very pragmatic. This is not head in the clouds by any measure. But it's almost like you had to have like gone through a head in the clouds phase before you can properly benefit from Zen. Okay, friends, hopefully this second video actually gave you guys some more insight as to the last one, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.